Back here at the Cattle Chat Corner, I'm Trent Luce with Dr. Brent Woodward. We talk a lot about genetics today, and we're measuring feed intakes, trying to figure out how predictable we can determine feed efficiency in the next generation. And it wasn't that long ago, almost in my lifetime, Brent, I'm 46 years old, that we thought we were doing big things by weighing calves when we wean them. And now we're looking at genomics, and we're looking at so much information. How far can it go when we look at measuring and evaluating genetics?
Well, I think one of the key things we have to think about is that producers start to get to the point of information overload. And in reality, one of the best ways to help producers along with that process is the fact that indexes have come along to start reducing this massive amount of information down into fewer and fewer numbers through the index technology. So you have indexes that will help them basically focus on their key traits of interest that impact their bottom line. Of course, they still have multiple ones of those they can choose from, but we know that feed efficiency is still a really key factor in all that, and so that is a big push in today's industry, whether you're looking at it from an individual intake using the actual individual measurement system or you're using a genomic measure. Again, all these are tools that the producer has at their disposal, and some of them obviously are at a different stage in their development than others, and the producer has to really have a discerning eye as to which ones of those are best for them to use.
So maternal line indexes, terminal line indexes, and knowing exactly what you're trying to accomplish is ultimately going to be instrumental in knowing how to get where you want to be.
Certainly, you know, I've just come from a program where the discussion was all about the cow-calf producer actually knowing where they were headed with their cattle, and if they were going to retain ownership, then they really had to start driving at the fact of what kind of calf are they producing, and in reality, are those kind of calves really going to give them profit? As it's kind of funny because it was a discussion about value-based marketing, and I can remember in the early 90s we were talking about value-based marketing, and you know, it's kind of funny to think about producers are finally starting to realize that really does hit home at some point, and they can really capitalize on it, or they can really lose out if they're not prepared.
Did I hear you just say that too many cattlemen are German hard-headed individuals like Trent Luce, and it takes 10, 15 years to get it to sink in?
Well, I wouldn't want it to come out just like that, but having been a former extension person, I did work in Minnesota where I could say there were a fair number of folks who enjoyed doing things the way they were used to doing it.
But are the progressive people, what percentage of the people are adopting these new strategies?
Oh, I guess I couldn't really guess. I mean, I couldn't really come up with an accurate number, I don't think, but I would say that it's pretty clear there's a growing number of producers who've realized that the calves that they actually are producing on their operation are having an impact in their bottom line as well, from a consumer standpoint, what they're actually delivering to the end consumer. And if they continue to look at that, I think they'll see that they are going to have an opportunity to increase their bottom line. If we look at some of the indexes that actually get at dollar values, and they use those to select their bulls, in addition to the characteristics that really work in their environment, the phenotypic characteristics such as structural soundness and so on, again, they're going to be able to make an impact in their cattle operation.
And that's really where it gets very dynamic, in that we need a cow that's profitable, grows and functions in a very good package from a form and function standpoint. But then, darn it, at the end of the day, we need to have something that the consumer demands and wants to pay a premium for. So it's not as simple as sometimes we make it out to be.
Well, that's true. In fact, if we look at history, we can see that we went through in the cattle industry some pretty amazing cycles with cow size and the outputs and so on. And as we think about what's that right size cow today, we have enough tools to really figure out what is the right size cow for an individual's operation. And we can get away from what you just said of going back a number of years thinking we could just get away with just weighing the animals. Now we know that we can look at all these other characteristics in the toolbox, and we can really come down to what is the right cow for that operation that's going to make the most money, and not just have the biggest, best, supposedly bigger is not always better, as we say, huh?
Glad you remembered that part instead of me saying that hard-headed Germans would never change. Final thing, Brent, is what about a drought-tolerant gene? Are we identifying that in cows? Because apparently that would be very valuable.
Well, that's a good question. I actually just had that discussion yesterday with some folks here from Noble Foundation, and it was Billy Cook actually, because we talked about the fact that we hadn't really looked at that, but the last couple of years in Texas and Oklahoma really taught us that maybe we should look at what that is. But he had a really good point that he went back 20 years and saw that the data showed that if we went back 20 years ago, there was a lower annual rainfall than they've had in the last 20 years. So we may have just adapted to our environment over the 20 years, and we just may need to bring those cattle back through genetics, whether it be a DNA test. I'm not so sure about that. That's a lot of data to collect in the first place. But we can do some sort of adaptation and selection to get back to those cows that were used to a little less rainfall on a little lower quality forage.
Dr. Brent Woodward here with our Cattle Corner discussion, reminding us basically the premise that we've had all week, that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So measure the tools, get away from your hard-headed traditional trends, and be a part of the future of the food industry. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Trent.
I'm Trent Luce from the Cattle Industry Convention. Thanks for joining us.